Hi everybody, my name is Kayla and welcome to my channel where we discuss all the best project management tips. If you haven't already, I would love to invite you to subscribe. Today's video is all about how to think like a top performing project manager. Because I have to tell you, if you're just going through the motions, that's not going to get you to the next level. I'm going to share 5 tips which you can implement immediately, regardless of your skill or level of experience, to help you start thinking like a top performer and start achieving more at work and beyond. With each tip, I'll provide a few questions that you can ask yourself in your daily project management to start incorporating this mindset. So let's get started. Tip number 1, begin with the end in mind and continue with the end in mind. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Stephen Covey's famous concept, begin with the end in mind. This is from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, the idea is that without knowing where we want to end up, we obviously can't appropriately take steps to get there. And in project management, we know that we have to know precisely why the project is important and how it contributes to the overall goals of the organization. We might call this a North Star. And that North Star has to be established at the start of the project and be the guide by which all activities are structured around in order to continue with the end in mind. And as the project manager, you are the one responsible for making sure this happens. Now, I've spoken at length about the importance of a solid project initiation, previous videos here, and that's because so often when I coach project managers, their current challenges can be traced back to not having a solid initiation with sponsors and stakeholders from the start. And as the project progresses, then it turns out that these parties have different expectations, which can cause all kinds of problems like scope creep and project stalling, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with. Now, as a top performing project manager, you can mitigate these project destroying issues by clarifying project goals and objectives at the start, getting formal buy-in, and ensuring that you tie every project activity back to the agreed upon goal. Some key questions you can ask to achieve this mindset are, what are the expected results of this project and what problem does it solve? How will we measure the success of this project? And what are we not delivering with this project? Tip number 2 for high-performing project managers, break it down, then break it down again. One of the biggest challenges in project planning is estimation. Depending on your type of project and the industry that you work in, there are going to be certain best practices that you want to follow. Some projects are inherently easier to estimate than others. Some require more generous buffers than others, but all are going to have some degree of ambiguity when it comes to estimation. The best project managers know that in order to estimate properly, we have to break things down over and over and over again. Top performing project managers also know that they don't always have all the answers. That's why collaboration with team members and subject matter experts is necessary to building project plans with more accurate estimates. You're going to want to make sure you build time into your project planning process to consult with your team regarding estimates, and also consider the wisdom that we often tend to be a lot more optimistic than realistic during this phase, which means you probably want to add a safety margin. Some key questions you can ask to develop this mindset are, have we broken down the estimate to the smallest degree possible? How confident are my team members with these estimates? And how are we using data to help inform our estimates? Tip number 4 for high-performing project managers, track data to show your value. We know project managers are important, but it's often difficult for us to explain why or how we're making a positive impact on the project. That's because the work we do can be nuanced and it's difficult to tie back to specific outcomes. But a top-performing project manager is creative and aware, and they're going to discover ways to show their value to their executive teams beyond simply managing the project. Before beginning work on any project, you're going to want to gather as many relevant data points as possible to help measure the performance of yourself, your team, and the overall project. Many top-performing project managers I know create dashboards for themselves to track and report on this data, even when it's not explicitly requested. This helps them gain deep insight and communicate it back to sponsors, stakeholders, and executive teams. And then often, through tracking these metrics, they can uncover opportunities and further prove their value to their teams. That's where the magic lies. Some questions you might want to ask yourself to develop this mindset are, which data points will help me tell the story of my project? Which results are most important to my sponsor, leadership, or executive team, and how can I track these results using metrics from the project? And where do I suspect there are opportunities for improvement, and how can I track this opportunity using data from my project? Tip number 4, communicate like a chameleon. As project managers, we know a big portion of our job is communication with stakeholders, sponsors, project teams, subject matter experts, external clients, and the list goes on. Each person has a different role and a different personality and a different communication style. And top performing project managers know that they can't communicate with everyone in the same way if they want the best results. So learning how to identify the most optimal communication style for each person and each situation is an art, but it's one worth mastering. Now, I have a few tried and true techniques that I use to make sure my communication is hitting the mark with everyone, each and every time. The first is during kickoff, when we're usually communicating a lot of information all at once, and I want to make sure the message gets across. So I always try to get it across in 3 different ways: verbally during the meeting, visually during the meeting, like with a deck, and through writing after the meeting. This ensures that the message is getting out there in as many ways as possible, because I understand that we all process information differently. My second communication tip is regarding sponsor or executive team communication. I always recommend making sure your communication with sponsors or executive leadership is concise and to the point, because these people typically go from meeting to meeting, and they are going to really appreciate short and to the point. They also tend to get decision fatigue. So my suggestion is that if you need a decision made, to present the problem quickly and clearly, then present a few different viable solutions that you've already researched, along with your top recommendation for how the problem can be solved. So this way you've really already done the back work for them. And not only will this be easier for them to make a decision, which they're going to appreciate, but it's also going to build trust in your relationship, which we know is invaluable. And my final tip for communication is to ask. Talk to your team members, your stakeholders, and anyone else to see what their preferred communication methods are, and then create your communication plans around that information. So some key questions you can ask to develop this mindset are, what is the desired outcome from this communication? What would I want to know if I were the person receiving this information? And what would make it easier for me to do my work or answer the question or make a decision? All right, my 5th and final tip for becoming a high-performing project manager is to level up your performance through continuous evaluation. So similarly to the first item we mentioned, with begin with the end in mind and continue with the end in mind, continuous evaluation and adaptation to the current circumstance is a hallmark of a top-performing project manager. We know that nothing ever fully happens according to plan, so maintaining flexibility within your project plan and awareness of your own efforts is so important to leveling up. Through critical evaluation, you can begin to understand how and where to double down and what to leave behind in order to more effectively deliver your standout project. So what exactly do I mean by this? Well, I'm currently reading the book 10x is Easier Than 2x by Dan Sullivan. It's a really good book. And the overall concept of this book is that we have to continually evaluate where we are, where we want to be, and how our current work is contributing to the desired end. And while this is a book for entrepreneurs, it also resonates with me as a project manager because our projects are evolving over time. Setting a plan and carrying it out like a robot might be one way to get something done, but we have to ask ourselves, are we getting the right things done in a smart way like a high performer, or are we doing it like just another project manager? If we want to be a high performer, then we have to ask ourselves the hard questions and get in the habit of ruthlessly prioritizing on a day-to-day basis. So some key questions you can ask to start developing this mindset are, what is the 20% of your work that helps you make the biggest impact? What is the 80% of your work that's keeping you in busy mode, but not necessarily increasing your value? How can you reorganize your workflow to focus more on the 20% that actually moves the needle? Okay, so that concludes my 5 tips for how to start thinking like a top performing project manager. I hope this video was helpful, and as always, if you need more help, I'm available for one-on-one through my website, or if you're interested in freelancing as a project manager, I invite you to check out my freelance project manager course, which is linked through the video description below. See you next time.